Hello, and welcome to the Pollinator Habitat How-To webinar series. And today we'll be covering the basics of native plant gardening. Next up, we have Roslyn, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Roslyn Imrie. I am the current president of Ozark Wild Ones. Ozark Wild Ones the Ozark chapter of the Wild Ones organization covers the Ozark area. We are all about promoting the growing and landscaping of native plants. Native plants is our big thing. We are all volunteers that just are very passionate about growing native plants and landscaping with native plants. And we just try to provide education in the Ozark area. We have members throughout Northwest Arkansas, but then over into Oklahoma, up into Missouri. We're not Arkansas based as much as Ozark based, because once you get down into Southern Arkansas, they have different native plants down there. So we're really ecocentric and thinking about the space that we're occupying naturally, not necessarily the man-made borders. And like I said, we're just an organization providing education to the community. We have a membership that you can join, and you can join our community that way. And we have monthly discussion times. We do an annual seed swap and an annual plant sale, all for native plants. And yeah, hope some of y'all will get involved. So today I'm talking about putting your native garden to bed for winter, and I'll probably overlap some with what was just said, but basically your garden did not die in the winter. It's just hibernating. It's going to sleep. So are a large amount of creatures living in the gardens that you're growing your native plants in. And these spaces we want to keep healthy through the winter. So here's some examples. The Luna moth, a beloved moth. Its cocoon is literally made. It wraps itself up in dead leaves. So here in this picture, you can see it looks like leaves. You would not be able to detect that, see that, and pull it out of your leaf pile. It's very well camouflaged. Another beloved creature that's living in the leaves is a firefly. And here's a little firefly pupa. And again, they burrow into the leaf litter, into the ground. And so this is environment for them. This is their habitat through the winter. They need those spaces to get through the winter. I think a lot of times we think of the monarch butterfly, and a lot of uneducated people will just think, oh, the monarch butterfly, it flies to Mexico, and so all those creatures have left. But most of the creatures that live in our gardens are burrowing down and waiting for spring, either as a pupa or an egg, maybe in a chrysalis or cocoon. And then in spring they'll emerge as an adult, or sometimes they'll live there all year and emerge the next year as an adult. And I'll get a little more into that here in a minute. So some of the other presentations we're talking about, providing habitat, providing food and water is really important. But it also is super important that we provide shelter. And I think shelter is often forgotten as a necessity for all living things. So if you're growing a native garden, you're providing food through those flowers, through the berries, and then having some pond or water is really important. But another really vital stage is having that shelter, and then having that shelter all year. I think it's easy for us to have shelter in the growing season because we have all these beautiful plants and this beautiful space. But then we have this tendency to be like, all right, let's clean up this space and make it pretty for our aesthetics. But by cleaning that up, we're destroying that shelter in the wintertime. So what I'm really focusing on today is that shelter aspect. different species are going to be hibernating in different locations. And I'm using the word hibernate there very loosely. Obviously, some of these guys are not hibernating. I think that word just helps us understand that they're staying put for the winter, but a lot of them are in their pupa stage or their little eggs. They're at different stages of their lives. But the three main spaces that these species are occupying are your leaves, your stems, and in the ground. So the main ones are leaves, stems, and in the ground. And so I'm going to talk about each of those spaces separately in that order. And and then I yeah, and then we'll have room for questions. So first, we're going to start with leaves. I think a lot of folks have heard leave the leaves. And that's where we're going to begin. So 95% of moths winter over in their pupa stage in the leaves. So there are so many different species of moths that need the leaves to winter over. There's a wide variety of species in the leaves. You have different caterpillars. You have things that are in the leaves, and then you have things that just could be fallen into the leaves, like the swallowtail chrysalis that looks like a little scrap of bark um, that's maybe supposed to be on a tree but has fallen into the leaves. So you have things like that. You have the red streak butterfly lays its eggs on oak leaves. So this is just a little tiny, egg of a butterfly that is impossibly small. The leaves also provide shelter for mammals and reptiles and amphibians and all sorts of other creatures. But today I'm going to talk a lot about the insects because it's really critical for them. And they are so small that, you rake up your leaves, you bundle up your stems, you're just going to be taking them with you. And so they're kind of the most vulnerable. And they're the basis of the food chain. So insects are absolutely critical to our livelihood and our ecosystems. So what to do with the leaves? So leaving the leaves, and when we say leave them, I mean just leave them, just let them fall and be okay with them is the most ideal. Disturbing them in any way is, risking some little creature getting harmed. So leaving them is ideal. Um, if you just absolutely cannot leave leaves all over your yard, mulching with those leaves is another really easy second best. So maybe you want to rake them off of your grassy lawn, rake them into your flower beds, rake them around trees. That is a good second best. This also has the added benefit of keeping your soil moist and healthy. And also, leaves have amazing micronutrients. If you think about it, those trees have huge roots that are going deep into the ground and pulling out micronutrients from deep into the earth. And there's some of those nutrients are getting into those leaves. And so then to use those leaves to break down and give nutrients to your topsoil is just, there's nothing comparable to it. It's really important. And it really does wonders for your garden. Another less ideal is creating a leaf only compost pile. The creatures on the very bottom of this pile are likely to, get moldy and, maybe not survive, but it's definitely more ideal than other things you could do. Also creating a kind of leaf only leaf blanket cage. And that's what this picture is. So it's a little sapling here that someone's wanting to give a little more protection to. And so you put some wire around it, fill that wire up with leaves. This does a great job of protecting more sensitive plants. And with the way that we've had some harsh winters lately, this might be a really good idea if you have something that we're kind of at the edge of its zone and it has a hard time when we have those really hard freezes. This will help protect that plant and also give good habitat. And if you just don't have the space to keep your leaves, consider giving them away. Don't put them in plastic bags because you're likely to just bake the creatures in there. But giving it away in like big paper bags to someone who just has some space that they can throw it, that's better than the alternatives. Some things to not do with your leaves. Mowing is going to chop up those critters and kill them. Obviously, you are keeping the nutrients if you chop up your leaves by mowing them. So, there's worse things. Bagging them in plastic, like I said, that'll bake them. Taking them to like a compost facility, again, that's going to capture the nutrients, but nothing survives those compost facilities. Those creatures aren't going to be able to live through that experience of composting. And then burning leaves, that's just going to pollute the air, all the nutrients. It's probably the least ideal thing to do. And so next, how long do you leave them? And a lot of people will just say, "Oh, I'll break those leaves up in January or February. That's fine," but that's not going to be long enough. Waiting just until fall is over is not long enough because nothing is emerging in the middle of winter. Very little is emerging in the middle of winter. So leaving your leaves as long as possible. Some firefly species take 2 full years to emerge. So the fireflies laid their eggs in July. Those eggs are going to, I think they winter over and then they hatch as little grubs in your leaves and they live all next year as little creatures in those leaves and then go through metamorphosis and come as grown fireflies that next summer. So there's a whole 2-year cycle of some species of fireflies laying their eggs, going through their first stages of life and emerging as adults after a full 2 years. So that kind of gives you a perspective of leaving your leaves even till springtime, even till summertime might not necessarily be enough to save all the species. It might save some of them, but to be safe, to really preserve all those different species of fireflies, you really got to keep them where they're at and just let them be, let them decompose. All right, next we're going to talk about stems and all the little cavity nesters. So 30% of solitary bees winter over in stems. They're cavity nesters. So they burrow into the pithy centers of stems. I think there's a lot of buzz about saving the bees, but a lot of that focus is honeybees. Honeybees are European. They're not native to North America, and they're not necessarily pollinating all of the native plants that need to be pollinated. There's even some debate that the honeybees might be pushing and competing for habitat, not necessarily habitat, but for resources that the native bees need. So thinking about bees as not a honeybee hive, but as these solitary bees that are living amongst our gardens is really important. These native bees need our help. I thought this is a great little example of how many different types of bees. This is not even close to all the different types, but this gives an idea of how different types of bees need different size holes. So you have some bees that just need this tiny little 2.4 millimeter hole to go into, whereas a much larger blue orchard bee is going to use a big old 1/2 inch hole. So a variety of hole sizes for these bees is needed. They really like pithy wood that they can burrow into. And this is just an example. This is a cup plant. So this is a nice large plant with real big pithy wood. And you can see where my thumbnail just went into that to that pithy center. So it's real soft and bees can just burrow in there real easily. So these plants are really great to grow in your gardens and have in your gardens and then leave for habitat for the bees. So step one in fall or winter you want to leave those dead flower stalks so that birds have seeds. And then once the seeds are all gone, you can cut them back. And so this again, this is this Xerce graphic, which I just think is fabulous. Cutting back those stems from 8 to 24 inches. A variety of heights is also helpful because different bees kind of prefer different heights. Um, the female bees will nest in there, lay their eggs with pollen balls, and then the larva will eat that pollen. Step 2, cut the dead flower stalks at varying heights. I just said this, sorry. um, cutting them so that you have room between the branches or nodes is also helpful. Some plants, particularly pithy ones, will kind of have little nodes where it's harder to get through. So kind of looking at that if there's nodes or branches so that they have space to get in there is helpful. The tops can be used as mulch or composted, but we really want to leave the bottom. Leaving that bottom part is what's essential. And so in spring, those little insects are going to be, hanging out in there, doing their thing. In summer, the new growth of your garden will come on back. Something like a coneflower, they're not going to be bothered with the dead stems. They're just going to come up around it. They're going to hide that. You're not going to have to worry about staring at it all year because you'll have beautiful growth all around it. And again, you're just going to leave it. You're going to leave it through the next fall and the next winter so that that bee larva can develop. It'll hibernate through the winter and then that following spring. So again, we're talking 2 years of leaving those stems. That's when those adult bees will finally emerge. So this is the ideal way to give those emerging bees a place to lay their eggs and not tear them out of the ground and get rid of them before they can emerge as healthy adults. Obviously, you can remove that old stem after it's been there for 2 years, but you won't necessarily need to do much with it. It's going to just kind of decompose where it is. But if you you got a lot of it, it starts falling down and you want to go put it in the compost pile after 2 years to tidy up, that's fine. No harm done there. So next we're going to talk about the ground. So we talked about leaves and the stems and the ground. I think ground is often, overlooked as a really important nesting site for a lot of creatures. 70% of the native bees are ground nesters. So we have the cavity nesters, but there's actually a lot more that are nesting in the bare soil. So they need loose, bare soil, preferably a little bit sandy. This area should be undisturbed, and young bees may need 11 months underground so that you really don't want to be disturbing these areas. They look like these little mounds with a little hole in them. And there are a wide variety of different bees that are using this. And when I'm talking about these, I'm also not talking about our ground nesting wasps, which are aggressive and create a whole little hive under there. Your little mining bees, as they're called, these are just one mother per nest. They emerge in early spring. They're responsible for a lot of the pollination in the early part of the year. Those early fruit trees, they're absolutely critical for those. They pollinate all of our little ephemeral flowers and things like that. And they're definitely not aggressive. It's just one mother with her little eggs. There's not like a hive of bees in there that are going to come out and get you. They're solitary bees. So with all of these bees, these are our native solitary bees. They don't live in a hive, so they don't have that hive mind where they're attacking and aggressive. They're just one little mama with her little nest, and she's going to leave you alone. So a great way to create these spaces in the ground, because you don't want to just, clear away everything and just leave open ground, is to plant native grasses. So this is not a great example of a garden, but it does show you how we have these clumping grasses where they grow in a clump, and then there's some space between the next clump. And so this kind of just naturally will happen with a lot of types of native grasses, and you'll have this just bare space between your clumps of grass. And that provides great habitat for these nesting bees where they can get down there, make their little home in the grasses, and then you're also not stepping on them and accidentally digging around them. They've got their little habitat among the grasses. So here's just a short list of some different grasses that might be good to use. On the Ozark Wild Ones website, we have some fabulous lists of native plants, well-behaved native plants, with really good information about what specifically the native plant needs as far as space and how big it grows, when it blooms, all that good information that you want to know before planting like a landscaping with native plants. So this list here was directly pulled from there. I pulled some native bunching grasses from one of our lists of grasses. So that's a great resource for y'all. And you also can just think about, where you're landscaping, maybe some pavers, leaving some little spaces between pavers. I think this is, one of those spaces where we might not think of this as habitat. We're talking, kind of specific habitat, but it's crucial for all these native ground nesting bees. This is kind of a list of references I used for this presentation. I did pare this presentation down a lot so that it would fit in 20 minutes. But that's what I've got for y'all today. So thank you very much. If you want to learn more about native plants, go to Ozark Wild Ones, ozark.wildones.org. Like I said, we have a lot of resources on that page, free for you to use. We have some great native plant lists. We also do monthly programs through the growing season. We have garden tours and and those are always native garden tours that are all based on habitat and growing native plants, where you can really see some of this in person in someone's yard. We also have indoor programs throughout the colder season, and we have an annual seed swap and an annual plant sale, all for native plants only. So get involved. Hope to see you all around and grow some plants.
Thank you so much, Roslyn. Wonderful as always. And let me just make a shameless plug. Wild Ones has a wealth of Arkansas specific resources. Also, they have a lot of recorded webinars on their YouTube channel, and I will do my best to send out links after the fact to those that attended live. If not, just check it out on their website, just like Roslyn said.